good things that came out of all this. And that would be how the PeDIA has helped all the kids around the country. So I just love when I get stories about how PeDIA saved the day, or some kid was just terrified, and after using the balloon, they were just excited to come back the next time. The other day, I actually had one of my commercial trial hospitals talk about how they use PeDIA for a number of autistic kids, and it worked great. That melts my heart.
Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. My guest today is a CRNA turned inventor who is challenging the way we typically think about pediatric inductions. Diane Miller is an accomplished CRNA for over 20 years, and she was happy to finish out her career in that field until one day a 4-year-old child changed the trajectory of her life. During a standard pediatric induction, utilizing an anesthesia mask, the complete terror in this child's eyes ignited a passion in Diane to change this archaic, traumatic ordeal into a fun and friendly experience. Diane is now the CEO of PeDIA, LLC, where her revolutionary device will turn panic into play. Diane, I'm so happy you could join me today.
Bobby, thank you so much for inviting me here. Congratulations on your podcast and your thriving business, and for letting CRNAs know that there are many avenues to success.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I've been, we've been trying to make this work for a little bit, and I know we've had some back and forth with that. So I'm ecstatic to finally be able to get a hold of you and get you here. But I want to begin with this pediatric induction story. I know that every anesthesia provider across the country has learned how to, ride that bucking bronco, so to speak, when it comes to those pediatric inductions. And, I've had smooth inductions with kids. I've had rough ones. So tell us about how this one experience really changed you.
Okay, well, and it really was, it sounds like it was one experience, but I think it was just the conglomeration of, as you said, over 20 years of exposure to pediatric induction. So one day I got my assignment. Actually, I didn't have my assignment. I had a completely different assignment. And a CRNA came up to me and she said, Diane, would you please change with me? Because I'm in pediatrics, and I hate pediatrics. And not that she hates kids, but she doesn't like the whole bucking bronco thing and having to deal with parents and, everything that goes with the whole pediatric scene. And so, for a long time, I've been the default pediatric CRNA because I don't mind. And and so I walked into my pre-op room after looking at the chart, ready to take on this first pediatric case of the day. And I was met by a 4-year-old with her hand in the air, looking me straight in the eyes, screaming, "No mask, no mask, no mask." She was screaming. And I don't even know how she knew who I was. I'd never met her before. So for hip's sake, I'll call her Patient Z. Patient Z was a 4-year-old status post retinoblastoma patient, had the enucleation 2 years before. And so, so she comes in regularly. Probably once a month for a while, just to make sure there's no seeding in the other eye. And so she has had many, many, many exposures to the anesthesia mask. And that's the thing that upsets her the most. And studies will show that the most upsetting part of surgery for a child is the mask. And honestly, I remember my mask induction at 4. I was so bad that I bit the doctor. So you will be happy to know that I don't bite people anymore. You remember that. And Z, she didn't bite me, but she almost kicked my teeth out. So she screamed the whole way back to the operating room. We got her on the table and did the bucking bronco thing, the Brutane. And for those of you who don't know what Brutane stands for, Brutane means it's an anesthesia euphemism that equates to 1 part anesthesia and 2 parts brute force. So it took 3 adults to hold this child down as I was trying to place the mask. And she was so strong. She did curl up and kick me right in the face. And as this poor little darling was going off to sleep, looking up at me, just pleading, "Why are you doing this?" I heard someone say, "Oh, honey, just blow up the balloon." You know how we all say that.
Yeah.
And bam, BFO. I got this blinding flash of the obvious. And I looked over at the reservoir bag that's supposed to be the balloon and thought to myself, if I promise her a balloon, why don't I just give her one? And it happened that fast. And just this flood of ideas came as I was putting her off to sleep. So anyway, the rest of the case went well, except upon awakening, she was just a crazy girl too, because as a child goes down, that's how they wake up. And so I went home and started working on designs. And when I was able to bring my first prototype there, I asked to be in Z's room. And so the same scene happened. I walked into the pre-op room. She started screaming, cried all the way home. And this time my anesthesiologist had this, great idea to put her on her lap, try to kind of hold her and calm her down. That didn't work out well because she almost gave her a bloody nose. With that little headbutt.
Yeah.
And everybody was around. And so I just took the mask off, put my PeDIA balloon on, and walked over to her and just kind of whispered, "Hey, Z, you want to play with my balloon?" And she's like fighting and kicking. And, she's crying so hard, there's snots coming out of her nose. And she reaches over to me, she grabs the balloon, and without any prompting from me, she puts it in her mouth and starts breathing in and out. And I had nitrous and oxygen. And a couple breaths later, she calmed down. And I was like, "Ooh." So I turned on the SIVO, a few more breaths. She fell out, went to sleep. And I was like, "Put her on the table." And that was it. The following month, I asked for Z again. And this time she was squealing again, jumping up and down because she wanted to go back and play with her balloon.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it was wonderful. We went into the operating room. She was all hip to do her balloon. I filled up the PeDIA and she snatched it out of my hand. She pushed me away and she looked at me with the confidence of a 4-year-old and said, "I can do it myself." And so she did. She put herself to sleep. And after that, I came home, sat my husband down, and I said, "I don't care what it takes. Every child needs to go to sleep this way." And so that was, oh my God, in 2015. So this is not.
So 6 years ago.
Yeah, this is not a short road. Now, I will tell you that it took me so long for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I was getting my kids through, into college. And so I kind of had to table it for about a year. And then after that, it was just full speed ahead, but I didn't know what I was doing. We are trained to put people to sleep, bring them to the brink of death, and then bring them back, and but we were trained to talk to engineers and lawyers and regulatory affairs consultants and manufacturers and quality assurance people and all of these things. And this is a very long, dark, lonely road. with very few signs along the way. And so I had to take things very cautiously, very slowly, because one little misstep for me could cost me literally tens of thousands of dollars in the garbage. And
Wow.
so I would go to work all day, read regulations at night until my brain was about to explode and I passed out. And then just slowly, step by step, got here to my launch date. COVID, of course, slowed me down again, as it did everything else.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I probably would have been on the market last year if
Yeah.
it were not for COVID. So
Yeah.
that's
But
my
even
story.
so, you take that 6-year process, even if you take off a year that you waited and then a year for COVID, that's still a 4-year
Right,
process.
right.
So, and I mean, I just, you talking about the 4-year-old, thing. It's so funny because just before we started recording this, my youngest is 4, and she comes into the kitchen and she's like, I put my own lotion on all by myself. And it's that is that age. And it's the same thing. I mean, my 6-year-old's the same way. He wants to do things on his own. And
Mhm.
so that being something that they can do. And I remember, when I would put kids to sleep, we would try with some of them to, oh, we'll focus on the balloon over here. And it's like they're turning their heads and they're, okay, now you're not in a good airway position. They're obstructing their airways, or, and they're trying to blow up this balloon, or, they start to have that gas and they smell it and then they want to just pull it away. They don't
Right.
want any more of that. So, um, how is it different with the balloon versus the mask? Is it because they're not smelling it so much that it's a better experience for them?
Well, distraction is always the key with children. And so, it's not that the mask has been great since it was invented or thought of in the 1930s, but we just had no viable option. And so anesthesia folks, we've been trying distraction in every way possible. Clown doctors, bubbles, I mean, all kinds of contraptions, pharmacological and non-pharmacological approaches. But a child's best coping mechanism is play.
Mm-hmm.
And so the balloon is, first of all, a great distraction because it comes in 3 different colors. So first of all, they get to pick their own color, which gives them a little bit of their power back.
Yep.
And we like that. I like to start with a little bit of nitrous and oxygen and just kind of get a couple breaths of that on board. And then turn on the SIVO. So the balloon is a brightly colored medical grade balloon, and the mouthpiece is actually a whistle. And so as they breathe in and out, it makes a fun siren sound. I don't know if you know those child party whistles, as you breathe in and out.
Yeah.
It makes woo, woo.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's actually become their favorite part. Z didn't even have the whistle, and she was great with it. And so it's physical because they get to hold it and put themselves to sleep, which from your 4-year-old, they like to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's brightly colored. It's something that's familiar to them because most kids know what a balloon is, and it looks like a balloon to them. And then it makes a nice noise. And as you alluded to, right, they don't smell it because the mask is forced over your face and over your nose. And so even the kids that, use the iPads and the iPhones to watch their favorite cartoon. A little side note, if you're going to give a kid one of those things, please clean it. Those things are disgusting. Just clean them. I get so grossed out when I see anesthesia people go from one kid to the other, and they take the phone right out of their pocket and give it from one kid to the other to the other. It just grosses me out.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but even when they're watching their favorite cartoon, as soon as that mask goes on, first of all, it's plastic. And I've had kids tell me that they feel like they're suffocating. And if you've ever put a mask on yourself, try it. I'm not going to ask people to put a mask on themselves and turn 8% SIBO on. But if you were to do that, you can imagine you're going to feel like you're suffocating. So they put the balloon in their mouth after they watch my little video, because I have a little animation for them. And they get really excited about that, put it in their mouth, put the balloon in their mouth, seal their lips around it, and within a few minutes, they go to sleep. And they are either sleepy enough that you can just slip an LMA in, which I've done to a number of children. Or if you need to start an IV or you need to get them deeper, then you just take the PeDIA off, put a mask on, and finish ventilating them and finish the induction however you want to. I'm not here to tell experienced CRNAs how to do their induction, but you have two ways to do it. So yes, it's a great distraction device. They get to make choices. They get to do it on their own, and they don't have this smelly, stinky, claustrophobic feeling mask on their face, and no butane. So that's a plus.
It's so clear how much thought you have put into this device, and it's a very simple concept, but it is genius. And I'm sure that creating this product, as we mentioned, it's a 4-year process. It's not easy. So can you walk us through that invention process, all the different steps you had to take to get all of this approved and, get patents or whatever the case may be? Because you mentioned you had a laundry list of people that you just mentioned earlier, and I don't know who half of those people are. So, kind of go through some of that stuff for us, if you would.
Okay, so this is the abbreviated version because we don't have 4 hours.
Sure.
First thing that I did was I found a lawyer, and mine was a man. He did a Google search. Now, anybody who's out there can do like a Google patent search. And if you don't find anything out there, then take the next step. And the next step really is to do a thorough USPTO, US Patent and Trademark Office search to make sure that there isn't already a patent out there, because your idea could be so great that somebody else has already thought of it. So I hired a lawyer to do a thorough patent search. There was nothing else on the market out there like that. And so he did provisional patents, which means that there are three kinds of patents that we're really, there's actually 6, but there's 3 for CRNAs. There's a design patent, which is basically just drawings. There's a provisional patent that has a whole bunch of stuff in it, and it basically is a placeholder. So this placeholder says, okay, I have this really great idea, but I'm going to take a year to get all my ducks in order, to do any more R&D, any more research and development, or any other little changes, do prototypes and whatever's on my laundry list. And I have a year to do something to change it from a provisional to a non-provisional patent. And so those are things that you should have a lawyer do. A lot of people will say, oh, I can go online and, download all of this stuff. And your lawyer is there to do more than just file for you. He's going to do things like write your claims, and he's going to defend you to the patent office. Once the patent office actually gets around to looking at your patent, they will come back and try to discredit it. They do everything in their power, because that's their job, to get it thrown out. And they're not being mean. That's just the way it is. And so your lawyer plays a very big part at the beginning to protect you, and a very big part at the end to get you through the patent process. After that, then it came to getting a physical PeDIA in my hand, and that took talking to engineers to design it for me. I mean, I had the idea, but they have to put it into a CAD drawing, which is computerized assisted draft. and the CAD drawing will go to a 3D printer to make your first prototype.
Now, how did you find an engineer that would do that for you? Did you, I mean, just put something out there, or you try to do a search for
Well,
this?
there's a number of ways you can do it. I mean, you can always do a Google search. There's also a Google entity out there called Upwork. You can always find an engineer that way.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to find an engineer that worked for another CRNA inventor. And so that was wonderful. Jay Tudlaska, he and Amy Shepard ran the Copilot VL, Copilot Video Laryngoscope. And by the way, that was the first time I ever heard that a CRNA, invented or innovated something. That just blew me away. And all I thought to myself is, why didn't I know this? And so Jay gave me the name of his first engineer. Now that was my first engineer, and I've since then had 3 different sets of engineers.
Wow.
Just to tweak things. The first engineer, he got the general thing going and got me my prototype. And by the way, my first prototype is just that. It's the first prototype. After that, you make tweaks and you just try to get it as good as you can. After the first prototype, I went to something called a small run, which means I made just a few to see if they worked. And from there, I found a manufacturer who would do a larger run, but not a very large run. Like he made about 400 for me.
Okay.
But I'm kind of skipping over the part where I have to deal with the FDA. So because I have a medical product that, that we use on actual human beings, it needs to go to the FDA, and the FDA may say to you, hey, this is great. And it's so close to this other thing out there that we're going to exempt you. We're just going to call you a class 1 and exempt you. You don't have to do anything else. So the FDA is very risk averse. And so their whole point is to throw your thing out.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
and believe me, 89% of the submissions that go to the FDA are eliminated right off the bat. And a lot of times it's just a clerical error, but you really need to get ready for the FDA. And so the way I got ready for the FDA was I called the FDA. I called the Division of Industry and Consumer Education, DICE, at the FDA, and they are there to answer your questions. That is the only free thing you will ever get in this entire process. Let me tell you. That is the only thing that you will get, because you have to pay your lawyer, you have to pay the FDA, and I continue to pay the FDA, your regulatory affairs consultant, and that whole laundry list of people. So what I ended up doing was doing my own submission the first time, because I did something called a 513G. And 513G is basically just an introduction of my device to the FDA, and they send it to the Department of Anesthesia at the FDA.
Okay.
They look it over, and the FDA looks it over, and then they come back and they tell you what class it is. Are you a class 1, 2, or 3? If you're a class 1, you're pretty golden. 2, you're probably still pretty good. Class 3, it means that this is pretty risky. It's usually for implantable things like pacemakers and whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, but the FDA will decide if you are a class, 1, 2, or 3, and if you need to go the next step. Now, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, they looked at mine and they said, oh, this looks an awful lot like that, but you've changed the technology so much that now you need to do a 510K. So 510K is pre-market notification. And so that one I could not do by myself. And that is the reason why I had to hire a regulatory affairs consultant which is
Mhm.
someone who's just very good at filling out paperwork for the FDA and setting you on your path. So my regulatory affairs consultants, I got from a lot of networking.
Mhm.
So you can have a lawyer do it, that's going to cost you more money, or you can have someone who is called a regulatory affairs
Yeah.
consultant. She read over my stuff, gave me my path, and basically said, you have to do this, 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 and that. And this, and that cost a lot of money. Plus, I had to
Mhm.
pay her.
Mhm.
And you can't skip that part. And I would not suggest that you try to do this without a consultant because, as I said, you'll probably get turned down. So you go through the FDA. She set me on my path, which included doing all kinds of testing, biocompatibility testing, compliance testing, and
Yeah.
all of that. And it actually took me 2 years to do the testing, and because I didn't know what I was doing, and I researched like crazy. You know, when I hire a plumber, I get 3 different quotes.
Mhm.
So when I'm hiring someone to do compatibility studies, I probably had, 4 or 5 different quotes
Mhm.
because you really have to do your homework.
Yeah.
Um, and so we got through the FDA because everyone is going to ask, are you FDA cleared? And then after that, it only actually took 2.5 months to get through the FDA, but it took 2 years to prepare for it, just to put this in perspective. After that, we started doing we started doing commercial trials, which was when I started really hitting the marketing on this really hard.
Yeah.
And so I found some hospitals
Mhm.
that were willing to trial it, to just try it out, see if they liked it. And I'm happy to report that, we've done trials at least, I don't know, half a dozen, and there are probably 20 more hospitals signed up for samples to trial this. And then we had to, and then so where I am now is getting all of my manufacturing together. And
Mhm.
I had to had to decide, am I going to be a U.S. manufacturer, overseas manufacturer, because we both have their pros and cons. And once again, it's a lot of interviewing because you don't want to just go with the first person that says, "Oh, I can do this," and And the other thing is, if they say, "I can do it all for you," I can do all of your designs. I can do this. I can do that. Those are the people you want to stay away from. You want to keep your manufacturing and your prototyping and all these things separate. And
That's
and that's
interesting. Okay. So,
that's just because it's kind of like putting all your eggs in one basket. What happens if
yeah.
it breaks?
Yeah.
So,
No, that's a great piece of advice, but
mhm.
because a lot of people would think like, hey, well, if you go with one company, they can do everything, they get it taken care of. But again, yeah, if something goes wrong with one part of that process, you all of a sudden have to switch everything.
Right, right.
So,
So
it does make sense when you really stop to think about it. So, you mentioned getting into these hospitals. What does that whole process look like? How do you get people to try your balloons and to get them into more operating rooms across the country?
this is where it really pays off to be a CRNA. So what I did was I just asked. I went on a couple of CRNA sites and I said, "Hey, I got this really great thing. Anybody at such and such a hospital that might be willing to try it?" And the CRNA Nation just really came through for me. They would tag people and private message me, and that's how I got into the first few hospitals. And
Very cool.
that's actually how I got into one hospital that is going to be doing a clinical study for me. And then the other route that I took was I just do tons of advertising on LinkedIn, and I got a Facebook business page, and now I'm finally on Instagram. I think I started that like 3 months ago. And so a lot of that advertising is very good for branding
Hmm.
um, because you just need to get your name out there. You need to get it out there and come up with your logo and your slogan, and just kind of, I don't want to say bombard people, but even if they're scrolling by and they see your logo, it just kind of seeds the subconscious. And on LinkedIn, I also had a few anesthesia departments reach out to me, and one is a very major children's hospital, and since last year, the chief of the cardiac anesthesia unit has been doing a separate trial for me. So
very cool.
She's going to actually publish in the Journal of Pediatric Anesthesia. You can't buy that kind of advertising.
No.
So it's a lot of hard work, and the advertising part I do 100% on my own, because everything costs so much. I have to save money somewhere. So I've done things like, bought software programs to make my own little 15-second or 6-second little video splurts, and little whiteboard videos for my insight marketing, which is basically just educating people on the anxiety surrounding induction. And so that's basically how I got to where I am today as far as marketing goes.
So now, obviously you're in communication with individual hospitals and whatnot, but you're just one person. So, I mean, do you have plans to have sales reps in the future to really spread this across the country, or how does that look for you moving forward? I know you're literally just launching the product now. Is that in your plans for expansion?
Well, I really have my feet on two different paths. One is to, as you say, do it all on my own, hire my own 1099 reps. And there are pros and cons to that. And I know enough CRNA inventors now that, I'm not going into this blindly. So I understand some of the drawbacks with having my own reps. My foot is also on the distribution path, meaning having a global company out there be my distributor. So basically what that means is they would buy the PeDIA from me and then turn around and sell it to their hospitals.
Okay.
So I'm still in the process of figuring out which way will be best. I did have a global company offer to, do this for me and get it out there and have it explode, but I really just didn't like the terms.
Yeah.
And a lot of people might say, "Are you nuts?" But the terms just did not settle well and in my gut. And yes, we aren't trained in all of those things, but one thing that anesthesia folks are very good at, and humans in general, if they're paying attention, is listening to their gut. Because anesthesia is, I swear it's like 20% science and 80% intuition, once you get to that point. And so when you've been hanging out with all these business people, after a while you start developing that same intuition. And so I have never once in my entire life said, "God, I wish I wouldn't have followed my gut." I've never once said that.
Yeah.
And so it didn't feel right. And so for now, I have a couple of other companies who may be interested in being my distributor. And I'm also getting my own forces together. But honestly, at this point, I just don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
I'm just launching now.
Fair enough. So, well, this has obviously been, a long process. It's been challenging. What have been the most challenging parts? And then what have been the most rewarding parts for you?
Well, I will start with the challenging parts. The challenging part for me was not knowing what comes next, not knowing what to do, who to ask. And, I fixed that for myself by forming a Facebook group called CRNA Inventors and Innovators. And we are now 600 plus strong. And not everybody in there is inventing something. Most people I think are just really curious. But there are a number of CRNAs in there who are much smarter than I am. They have done some really amazing things,
Yeah.
And so it was wonderful for me. I mean, I really did it to help other CRNAs out because I didn't know what I was doing. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to help any CRNA out there who was also a budding innovator. But I got so much more out of it than I ever would have imagined, because I could ask questions. I could PM people. We talked. We met at conferences. People who have so much more business sense than I do or did at the time. People who could guide me and say, Diane, make sure you look out for that. Hey, Diane, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And so it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful give and take. And, I have to say, when you do something, when you do anything in life to help other people out, you always get more back than you give out. And so this is a prime example of that, kind of the paying forward sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the big challenge. And now the big challenge is Mother Nature. So right now, I mean that because there was a big storm in Texas that messed up materials all over the globe. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
now I have all these manufacturing, things to deal with, but it'll just get settled, So
Yeah.
you have to think about so many things that you never thought you'd be worrying about. Politics, Mother Nature, materials, and this and that and the other things. So, but I do have a good network now to ask people or just to call them, once in a while, just to vent. I can't tell you how many times at the beginning of this, I had to call Jay, and he would just walk me off, talk me off the ledge. He did that a number of times for me. He and Amy and David Gomez and Wendy Hood is one of my best friends now.
Yeah.
And there's just a whole list of CRNA inventor innovators that are just so dear to me. They just give freely. So, and that's my point now, is to just give back to the CRNA community with the CRNA inventors and innovators. And a lot of people private message me and we talk on the phone, and I just try to guide people whenever and wherever I can. So you asked about what the good things that came out of all this, and that would be how the PeDIA has helped all the kids around the country. So I just love when I get stories about how PeDIA saved the day, or some kid was just terrified, and after using the balloon, they were just excited to come back the next time. The other day, I actually had one of my commercial trial hospitals talk about how they use PeDIA for a number of autistic kids, and it worked great. That melted my heart.
And we didn't even get a chance to get into, the special needs community and how this can really help them out. I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
Oh yeah, and I have a very special place in my heart for the special needs kids. But we'll talk about that at our next interview.
Absolutely. No, I'd love to have you back. So
thank you.
We'll definitely, we need to do a follow-up here.
We will.
Well, this has been so incredibly informative. I mean, it's clear that, you have really kind of gone through this whole thing, and you're getting more information all the time, and doing the networking, and you're just in the thick of it. And it's an amazing thing to witness. And, I know that you mentioned wanting to help other people out. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is www.pediaLLC.com. So it's PeDIA like pediatric or Wikipedia, however you want to think about it. And you can sign up and contact me through that. or you can just contact me directly by emailing contact@pediallc.com. And,
Okay.
if you want samples or you have any questions about the PeDIA, that's great. If you really want to talk about invention and innovation, you can still call me that way or get in touch with me that way. But you can also join the CRNA Inventors and Innovators on Facebook, and I would really suggest that, because then you'll have access to a whole group of people.
Cool. Well, thank you again for letting me, pick your brain today. This has been a lot of information for folks. I'm sure, some people are going to have to rewind it and listen to certain parts again. And so, I think it's so common for CRNAs to, have a bit of a light bulb moment, and, they get a great idea and they just, they get stuck somewhere in this process. And it's normally a lot earlier on than, you would imagine. So, this is going to help a lot of people with getting through some more of that process. So, that way they can kind of make their own inventions a reality. So, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
After we turned off the recording, Diane added, "Don't do this for the money. You will spend more of your own cash and sleepless nights than you can ever imagine, and it can still flop." But I will say the most powerful part of this conversation was just feeling the conviction in Diane's own story. She has so much faith in this device to help change the narrative around pediatric inductions. And she has staked so much time, money, and even her own reputation on this. When you believe in something, you are willing to sacrifice for it. And besides just tearing through any obstacles that she faced, Diane also showed her own flexibility along the way. You have to constantly adapt to face new challenges as an entrepreneur and inventor. It takes constant tweaking here and there to get you where you want to go. That's going to do it for us today. I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.